A stranger's hug at a small diner reminds us, Billionaire, that the greatest wealth isn't in money, but in the love he almost lost with his daughter. John Harrison was not a man who often stopped to think about the small, quiet moments of life. From a young age, he had been driven by ambition, pushing himself harder than anyone around him. He believed that hard work, determination, and smart decisions could solve almost anything. By the time he was in his 40s, he had built a business empire from the ground up, making him one of the wealthiest men in the country. He had cars that most people only dreamed of, houses in multiple countries, and the kind of lifestyle that people described as luxurious in magazines. But no amount of money, no mansion or fancy car, could fill the empty space he felt in his heart when he thought about his daughter, Emily. His daughter was 7 years old. She was a quiet, thoughtful little girl who often spent more time in her imagination than in the real world. She had her father's sharp mind in some ways, but her mother's gentle heart. She loved to draw, make small crafts, and ask questions about life. Sometimes the kinds of questions that made adults uncomfortable. The most important thing to Emily, though, was the memory of her mother. Her mother had passed away 2 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving a hole in Emily's life that nothing else could fill. Even though John tried to be there for her, he often felt awkward and unsure of how to comfort her. He knew he couldn't bring back her mother, and he feared that no words he could say would ever feel enough. John loved Emily in every way a father could love a daughter. But love alone was not enough. He had spent so many years focused on building his empire that he had missed the simple, everyday moments of being a parent, reading bedtime stories, attending school events, celebrating small achievements. He had been present in the ways that mattered on paper, providing for her, ensuring she had everything she needed, giving her the best education, and even hiring tutors and mentors. But in the quiet moments of life, the moments that didn't make headlines or get written in checkbooks, he often felt like a stranger to her. On this particular day, John decided to take Emily out for lunch. He had recently realized that they needed more moments together. Moments that were not scheduled around meetings, phone calls, or business deals. Emily had been quiet that morning, drawing pictures in her notebook while staring out of the window, and John felt a pang in his heart. He wanted to do something small, but meaningful, something that might bring a spark of joy to her day. So he chose a local diner, a place with checkered tablecloths, warm lighting, and a sense of comfort that no fancy restaurant could ever replicate. As they walked in, Emily's eyes lit up at the simple surroundings. She ran her fingers over the edge of the wooden booths and glanced at the menu with curiosity. John watched her quietly, feeling a strange mix of pride and sadness. He was proud of her curiosity, and her gentle nature, but sad because he knew she carried the weight of missing her mother everywhere she went. Even though she laughed and asked questions, there was a depth to her small, serious eyes that reminded him constantly of the loss they both felt. John placed the order for lunch, trying to make conversation, asking about her drawings and her school day. Emily responded politely, but John could tell something was on her mind. She was quieter than usual, and her small hands fidgeted with her napkin. He realized that she was thinking about her mother, as she often did. There was no shame in it, no hiding her grief. It was just a quiet, persistent sadness that lingered beneath her otherwise bright personality. John's heart ached because he wanted to fix it. He wanted to make everything better for her, but he knew there were no shortcuts. He could not buy her happiness. He could not buy back the days they had lost. And he could not replace the mother she missed so dearly. As they waited for their meal, Emily's gaze shifted around the diner. She watched other families laugh together, watched parents comfort their children. And in that moment, John saw the longing in her eyes. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but for a father who knew his daughter's heart, it was impossible to miss. He realized that she was yearning for a kind of comfort that went beyond what he could provide in words or gifts. She needed warmth, tenderness, something that reminded her of the security she felt with her mother. John felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to hug her, to say something that would make her feel safe, but he hesitated. He had never been a man comfortable with public displays of emotion. He had built walls around himself, walls that protected him in the business world but made it difficult to express vulnerability in personal life. He wondered if he had waited too long, if he had been too caught up in building a future to fully live in the present with the one person who mattered most to him, Emily. Sensing her father's hesitation, turned her gaze toward the waitress. She had always been able to feel the kindness in people, and she quietly asked for a hug, the kind of hug her mother used to give her. She didn't say much more, but the simplicity of her request hit John like a wave. It was a small, innocent plea, but it carried with it all the weight of loss, longing, and trust. She trusted this stranger, even more than her own father in that moment, to give her the comfort she was seeking. And John, standing nearby, realized that he had been given a chance to witness something profoundly human, something he had been missing for far too long. He watched silently as the waitress, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, knelt down to Emily's level and wrapped her arms around the little girl. Emily's face lit up, a small, radiant smile breaking through the cloud of grief she carried. For the first time in a long while, John saw her completely at peace, if only for a few moments. He felt a mixture of emotions he had never experienced all at once: relief, joy, guilt, and a deep, aching love. The hug was not just a simple act of kindness, it was a reminder of what truly mattered, a reminder that human connection, compassion, and presence were more valuable than any wealth or possession he had accumulated. As Emily pulled back from the hug, she looked at John with bright eyes and a small, hopeful smile. In that instant, John realized that this small outing, this simple lunch at a diner, was the beginning of something he had been missing in his life. It was a moment that reminded him that he could be there for his daughter in ways that went far beyond money or material comfort. It was a lesson in love, empathy, and presence, a lesson that would shape the way he approached fatherhood from that day forward. For the first time in a long time, John felt fully awake to the reality of his life. He saw the importance of being present, of noticing the small moments, of responding to the emotional needs of the people he loved most. He understood that Emily's happiness, her sense of security, and her feeling of being loved and valued were things that required more than a luxurious lifestyle. They required time, attention, and genuine human connection. And for a man who had spent so much of his life chasing success, it was a revelation that would change everything. The diner was warm and cozy, filled with the gentle hum of conversations and the clatter of dishes. John Harrison sat across from Emily, still feeling the weight of the moment he had just witnessed. He could not stop thinking about how his little girl had quietly asked for a hug from a stranger. A hug like the one her mother used to give. It was such a simple request, but it carried so much meaning. Emily's words echoed in his mind. "Can I have a hug like Mom's?" They were innocent, yet they pierced straight through the protective walls he had built around himself for decades. For a man who had always controlled every aspect of his life, who had faced challenges in business with strategy and calculation, this moment was different. It was raw, real, and beyond his control. John watched the waitress, Sarah, crouch down to Emily's level and envelop her in her arms. Emily leaned in without hesitation, trusting this stranger in a way that John wished she could trust him more easily. He noticed the change in Emily's expression, how her little shoulders relaxed, and her face lit up with a quiet happiness that was so rare these days. Her eyes shone with a warmth and relief that seemed to brighten the entire diner, at least for him. John felt a mixture of emotions: pride, relief, and something heavier: guilt. He realized he had been so consumed with work and building his empire that he had not noticed how deeply Emily missed her mother. He had provided for her materially, but emotionally he had left a void that someone else, even a stranger, could fill in that brief moment. Emily pulled back from the hug slowly, as if savoring every second. She smiled at Sarah, whispered a quiet thank you, and then turned her gaze toward her father. John could see the unspoken question in her eyes. "Why haven't you done this? Why can't you comfort me like this?" He felt a lump in his throat and had to remind himself to breathe. It was one thing to love his daughter. It was another to be present for her when she needed him most. This realization hit him harder than any business failure or financial loss ever could. For the first time in a long while, John felt powerless in the face of something money could not fix. The waitress went back to her duties, leaving John and Emily to their lunch. Emily, still holding on to the lingering warmth of the hug, quietly began telling her father about her day at school. She spoke about her friends, a drawing she had made, and the story she was working on for her class. John listened intently, but his mind kept drifting back to the hug, to how something so simple had given his daughter more comfort than he ever had in months. He realized that Emily didn't need extravagant vacations or the latest toys to feel loved. She needed his attention, his presence, and moments of genuine emotional connection. As they ate, John tried to engage Emily in conversation. He asked about her school projects, about her favorite stories, and about the games she liked to play. Emily responded politely, but every now and then, she would pause and look down at her plate as if searching for words that weren't there. John felt a pang in his heart, sensing the sadness she carried. He wanted to reach across the table and hold her hand, but old habits died hard. He was still uncomfortable with expressing affection openly, especially in public. He realized that he had to change, that he could not remain distant if he wanted to be a real father to his daughter. After a few minutes, Emily quietly asked John a question that made him pause. "Dad, do you remember when Mom used to tuck me in and read me stories?" The words were soft, almost a whisper, but they carried a depth of longing that made John's chest tighten. He remembered those nights vividly, the way Emily would curl up next to her mother, listening intently to the stories, her eyes wide with wonder. He remembered the smell of her mother's perfume, the gentle rhythm of her voice, and the warmth of the hugs she used to give. But now, those moments were gone, and John realized that no matter how much he tried, he could never bring them back. The thought filled him with sorrow, but also with determination. He needed to be there for Emily in the present to create new moments, new memories that could help fill the gap left by her mother's absence. Emily's question. John realized that she was still longing for comfort and reassurance, for the feeling of safety and love that her mother had provided. He wanted to give that to her, but he wasn't sure how. He had never been good at expressing emotion, at showing vulnerability, at being soft when the world demanded toughness. But he knew that if he didn't try, he would lose precious time with his daughter, time that he could never get back. He pushed aside the awkwardness and decided to speak from the heart. "I remember, Emily. I remember every story, every hug, every night. And I promise, I want to be here for you, just like she was." Emily looked at him with a mix of surprise and hope. For a moment, John saw a spark in her eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time, a glimmer of trust and connection that made his heart swell. She leaned closer and said, "Can we do that now? Can you read me a story?" John nodded, feeling a rush of emotion. He realized that these were the moments that mattered most, the moments that would shape Emily's childhood and their relationship forever. As they continued their lunch, John made a silent vow to himself. He would no longer allow work, business deals, or the pursuit of wealth to take priority over Emily. He would find ways to be present, to connect, and to comfort her. He would learn how to be the father she needed, even if it meant stepping out of his comfort zone, admitting his own vulnerabilities, and showing love openly. He knew it would not be easy, but seeing Emily's face light up after that simple hug had shown him what was possible. After finishing their meal, John suggested they take a walk around the small park near the diner. Emily agreed eagerly, holding his hand as they stepped outside into the cool afternoon air. As they walked, John noticed the little things he had missed before, the way she pointed out flowers she liked, the way she laughed at the ducks in the pond, the way she held onto his hand tightly whenever she felt a little unsure. Each small gesture reminded him that connection was built in tiny, everyday moments, not grand gestures or expensive gifts. During their walk, Emily began sharing stories about her friends and school again, and John listened, truly listened, for the first time, without distraction. He realized that by giving her his attention, by being fully present, he was offering something far more valuable than money or material comfort. He was offering love, stability, and the reassurance that she was not alone. It was a lesson he had never learned in the boardroom, one that he knew would stay with him forever. By the time they returned home, John felt a profound shift within himself. That small outing, That simple hug from a stranger had awakened something in him. He understood that fatherhood was not about providing everything, but about being there when it mattered most. About showing up emotionally and physically. About creating moments that Emily would carry with her for the rest of her life. He realized that he had a choice: to continue being distant and distracted, or to step into the role of a father fully, with all the love, attention, and presence that Emily deserved. That day marked the beginning of a change in John. He began to see the world differently, through Emily's eyes. Noticing the small joys, the quiet sorrows, and the moments of connection that truly mattered. He knew it would not be an instant transformation, that it would take effort, patience, and practice. But for the first time, he felt ready. Motivated by the love for his daughter and the understanding that life's most precious moments were often the simplest ones. The next few weeks were a turning point for John and Emily. After that day at the diner, something in John shifted. He found himself thinking constantly about the hug, about how much it had meant to Emily, and about how little he had understood her needs before. He realized that being a father was not just about providing her with material comfort or experiences that looked impressive on the surface. It was about being present, emotionally and physically, in the small, quiet moments that truly shaped a child's heart. John started to notice things he had previously overlooked. He noticed the way Emily's eyes would light up when she discovered something new, or the small gestures she made when she felt excited, nervous, or lonely. He noticed how she held her stuffed rabbit tightly at night, or how she sometimes stared out of the window, lost in thought, as if trying to remember her mother. Each small detail tugged at his heart, reminding him of the fragility and depth of her emotions. John began making a conscious effort to be there for her in ways he had never been before. He started with small changes. Mornings, which had once been rushed and filled with distractions like phone calls and emails, became a time to sit with Emily over breakfast. He asked her about her dreams, her worries, and even about her fears. At first, Emily was hesitant. She was used to her father being distant, preoccupied with work, unsure how to respond when she expressed herself emotionally. But slowly, she began to open up. She would tell him about her day at school, about small incidents that mattered to her, and even about memories of her mother. John listened with a patience he had never known he possessed. He realized that listening, truly listening, was a gift far greater than anything money could buy. One evening, as John tucked Emily into bed, she clutched her favorite blanket and whispered, "I wish Mom was here." The words, so simple and innocent, pierced John's heart. He knelt beside her bed, took her small hand in his, and spoke from the heart. "I know, sweetheart. I wish she was too. But I'm here, and I'll always be here for you. We can remember her together and make our own special moments." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she rested her head against his shoulder. It was a small, tender moment, but it was monumental for both of them. John felt a deep sense of purpose, realizing that these moments of connection were what mattered most in life as the days went by. John tried to balance his work with more intentional time for Emily. He began leaving his phone behind during their outings. Focusing solely on her, they started taking small walks in the park, baking cookies together, and even reading stories every night before bed. Emily's laughter, once rare and fleeting, became more frequent. John noticed her smile spreading across her face in ways that no toy, no gift, and no extravagance had ever managed to do. These moments reminded him that love and attention could heal emotional wounds in ways that money never could, but the journey was not always smooth. There were days when John's work demanded his attention, days when he felt torn between urgent business matters and his desire to be fully present for Emily. On those days, guilt weighed heavily on him. He would watch her play quietly in her room and feel the sharp sting of regret. He realized that no matter how hard he worked to provide for her future, he could never replace the moments lost in the present. Each missed hug, each distracted conversation, was a reminder that time with Emily was fleeting and precious. One afternoon, John took Emily to a small bookstore she loved. As they wandered through the aisles, Emily picked up a storybook about a little girl who had lost her mother but found comfort in new friendships. She looked up at John, her eyes wide with understanding, and said, "This girl reminds me of me." John's heart tightened. He knelt beside her and held her hand, saying gently, "And just like her, you are strong, brave, and loved. I will always be here to hold your hand." Emily's face brightened, and she hugged him tightly. In that hug, John felt the weight of responsibility, but also the joy of connection. He knew that moments like these were building a foundation of trust, love, and security that Emily would carry with her forever. John also realized that he had to confront his own emotions. He had spent so long burying his grief over the loss of his wife, focusing on work as a distraction, that he had never allowed himself to fully feel the pain or the love he still carried. Watching Emily struggle with her own feelings made him confront his own. He cried quietly in the car after dropping her off at school one day, feeling both sorrow and relief. Sorrow for what they had lost, but relief that he was finally able to face it and begin to heal, not just for himself, but for Emily as well. The waitress from the diner, Sarah, became an unexpected reminder for John of how much small acts of kindness could change lives. He thought about her often, about the warmth she had shown Emily in a moment of need, and how that simple hug had shifted the course of their lives. It reminded him that human connection, empathy, and compassion were far more powerful than wealth or status. He decided to model these qualities for Emily, showing her not just through words, but through actions, how to be kind, caring, and emotionally present for others. One weekend, John arranged a small picnic at the park. Emily ran ahead, laughing freely, and John felt a surge of happiness he had not experienced in years. They shared sandwiches, played games, and even watched the clouds drift lazily across the sky. Emily leaned against him as they lay on the blanket, pointing out shapes in the clouds and telling little stories. John listened, fully present, and realized that these simple, shared moments were far more valuable than any luxury he could ever provide. The bond between father and daughter was growing stronger every day, rooted in trust, love, and presence. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's confidence and happiness grew. She began expressing herself more openly, sharing her thoughts, fears, and joys with John. He learned to recognize the signs of when she needed comfort, when she needed space, and when she simply needed someone to sit with her quietly. Through these small, intentional acts, John became not just a provider, but a true father, one who could nurture, guide, and love deeply. John also began to notice changes in himself. He felt more patient, more understanding, and more aware of the importance of emotional connection. Business meetings were still important, but they no longer consumed him entirely. He realized that life's true wealth lay in relationships, in love, and in the small, meaningful moments that build a lifetime of memories. The hug at the diner had sparked a transformation not just in his relationship with Emily, but in the way he approached life itself. By the end of this period, John had established a new routine with Emily. He was no longer the distant, preoccupied father he had once been. They shared meals without distractions, spent evenings reading and talking, and took weekends to explore parks, bookstores, and quiet places where they could be together. Emily's laughter was no longer rare. It was a part of their daily lives, a constant reminder that connection and love could heal even the deepest wounds. John realized that the struggle he had felt earlier, his fear, his guilt, and his uncertainty had been necessary. It had forced him to confront the truth that no amount of wealth or success could replace emotional presence. The challenges he faced in becoming the father Emily needed were not obstacles, but lessons. Each step forward, each shared moment of laughter or comfort, was building a relationship that would last a lifetime. Through it all, John came to understand that being a father was not about perfection. It was about showing up, learning, adapting, and loving consistently, even when it was difficult. He understood that Emily's grief for her mother would always be a part of her life, but that he could be a source of comfort, support, and love that helped her navigate that grief. And he knew, deep in his heart, that this journey was far more important than any business deal, any financial milestone, or any worldly success he had ever achieved. After weeks of reflection, and small, deliberate changes, John Harrison began to truly understand what it meant to be present for his daughter. He had always known he loved Emily, but love alone was no longer enough. He realized that showing love required effort, attention, and a willingness to be vulnerable. He started to actively create moments where he could connect with her on a deeper level. Moments where he could be the father she needed, not just the provider she already had. One Saturday morning, John decided to take Emily on a surprise trip to a nearby lake. It wasn't a luxurious outing, no private yacht or five-star service, just a simple day by the water with sandwiches, a blanket, and a few toys for Emily to play with. Emily's face lit up as she realized where they were going. She ran ahead, laughing freely, and John felt a joy he hadn't experienced in years. For once, he wasn't thinking about meetings, deals, or profits. He was fully immersed in her happiness. As they sat on the blanket by the lake, Emily began to share her thoughts about her mother again. She spoke softly about the things she remembered, the bedtime stories, the songs, and the way her mother would hold her close on scary nights. John listened quietly, letting her speak without interruption, understanding that sometimes the best comfort a parent can give is simply attention. He realized that he had spent too much of Emily's life listening to the world around him, business calls, emails, and obligations rather than listening to her. And now he was making up for lost time, one conversation at a time. During that day, John also encouraged Emily to explore and try new things. He watched her as she skipped stones across the lake, cheered when she made them bounce multiple times, and gently helped her when she struggled. Each small interaction became an opportunity to bond, to teach, and to reassure her that he was not just a father in title, but a father in presence. Emily's confidence grew with every small success, and John realized how much she needed encouragement and guidance, not just material things. When Emily asked him about her mother's favorite spots, John made it a point to include those places in their conversation. They sat under a tree she remembered her mother enjoying, and he told her stories of his own memories with her mother. Sometimes funny, sometimes tender, always honest. He wanted Emily to understand that it was okay to remember and miss her mother, but that it was also important to create new memories. Through these experiences, John began to see how crucial it was for him to be an emotional anchor, someone Emily could trust, rely on, and look to for love and support. The challenges, however, were still present. John struggled with old habits, checking his phone during conversations, thinking about business problems during moments of intimacy, and occasionally letting his stress show. Emily noticed these moments and gently reminded him, sometimes with a question, sometimes with a quiet sigh. Instead of becoming frustrated, John took these reminders to heart. He began practicing mindfulness, learning to leave work at work and fully engage with Emily when they were together. Over time, these small adjustments became natural, and their bond grew stronger. One evening, Emily came home from school with tears in her eyes. She had had a disagreement with a friend and felt hurt and confused. Normally, John might have offered a solution or brushed it off, thinking that problems like these were trivial compared to the adult challenges of life. But now, he knelt beside her, held her hand, and let her express herself fully. He listened without judgment, offered comforting words, and then shared his own stories of times he had felt hurt or lonely. Emily's tears gradually dried, replaced by a sense of understanding and relief. John realized that empathy, presence, and emotional honesty were the most important tools he could offer as a parent. John also made a conscious effort to involve Emily in his life, but on her terms. Instead of taking her to fancy dinners or events meant for networking, he brought her to his office only occasionally, giving her a peek into what he did, but making sure it was fun and engaging. He let her decorate a small part of his workspace with her drawings, told her stories about the people he worked with, even played small games with her during breaks. These interactions showed Emily that she was a priority in his life, and that his world was not complete without her. Over time, Emily began to take more initiative in expressing herself and sharing her thoughts. She would spontaneously run to John with small achievements, drawings, or stories, knowing he would listen with full attention. John noticed that she smiled more, laughed more, and even became more open about her feelings, including the moments when she missed her mother. He encouraged these conversations, understanding that grief and love could coexist and that acknowledging both was vital for her. Emotional growth. John's efforts also extended beyond small personal gestures. He began to adjust his schedule, cutting back on unnecessary business trips and delegating tasks that had previously consumed his focus. He realized that the time he had with Emily was finite, and that no amount of money could replace the moments he could spend nurturing her. He started prioritizing experiences that strengthened their bond, such as weekend trips to places she loved, arts and crafts afternoons, or just sitting in the park talking about life, dreams, and memories. One afternoon, they visited a small animal sanctuary. Emily was fascinated by the animals. John found himself laughing freely alongside her, something he had rarely done in the past few years. He realized that these shared experiences were more valuable than anything he had accomplished in his career. He began to see life differently, not as a series of goals and achievements, but as a series of moments, connections, and relationships that gave meaning to every day. The relationship between John and Emily also began to influence his own sense of self. He became more patient, compassionate, and emotionally aware. He noticed that when he approached life with empathy and openness, his interactions with everyone around him improved, not just with Emily. His business relationships grew stronger, not because of deals or negotiations, but because he had learned to listen, understand, and connect with others on a human level. He realized that the lessons he was learning in parenting were transforming him as a person. John also began to reflect more on the life he and Emily had before, acknowledging the grief they shared over the loss of her mother. He allowed himself to feel the sorrow, the longing, and the love that remained. Rather than suppressing these emotions, he shared some of them with Emily, showing her that it was natural to grieve, to remember, and to carry memories of loved ones in one's heart. This honesty strengthened their bond, helping Emily feel understood and supported. One evening, Emily hugged John tightly after dinner and whispered, "I love you, Dad." The words were simple, yet they carried immense weight. John held her close, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose. He realized that all the efforts, all the conscious changes he had made, were culminating in moments like this, moments of true connection and love. For the first time, he felt that he was not just a father in name, but a father in every way that mattered. Through this journey, John discovered that the challenges he had faced, the awkwardness, the guilt, the fear of being emotionally vulnerable, were not obstacles, but lessons. Each struggle taught him something about himself, about Emily, and about the importance of love and presence. He came to understand that parenting was a continuous process of learning, adapting, and growing alongside his child. It was not about perfection. It was about showing up day after day with sincerity, patience, and an open heart. By the end of this period, John had fully embraced the idea that life's true wealth lay in relationships. Emily had become more confident, joyful, and expressive, while John had grown into the father he had always wanted to be. The simple hug from the waitress weeks earlier had been a catalyst, but it was his consistent, intentional effort that transformed their lives. He realized that love, attention, and emotional connection were the most precious gifts a parent could give. Far beyond anything money could buy, John now understood that the journey was ongoing. There would still be challenges, moments of fatigue, and times when old habits threatened to resurface. But he had learned the value of presence, empathy, and emotional openness. With each shared laugh, each heartfelt conversation, and each quiet moment of comfort, he was building a foundation of trust, love, and security that would last a lifetime. The struggle had become a bridge, connecting father and daughter in ways that were deep, lasting, and transformative. The days and weeks following John Harrison's decision to truly be present for his daughter, Emily, became a period of profound change for both of them. What had started as a simple moment, a stranger's hug at a small diner, grown into a life lesson that reshaped John's understanding of love, family, and what it meant to be a father. He had learned that no amount of wealth or status could replace emotional connection, and that true fulfillment came from nurturing the people he loved most. Emily, now feeling more secure and loved than ever before, began to thrive in ways that John had longed to see. Her laughter filled the house, spontaneous and genuine, a constant reminder to John that their efforts were making a difference. She shared her thoughts and dreams more openly, speaking freely about the things that mattered to her. And even her grief over the loss of her mother became something she could discuss without fear. She began drawing more, writing stories, and exploring her world with confidence, knowing that her father was there to support her every step of the way. John realized that these small signs of growth and happiness were the real treasures of life, far more meaningful than any business accomplishment he had ever achieved. John also noticed a remarkable change within himself. He was calmer, more patient, and more emotionally aware. By focusing on Emily and her needs, he had learned to slow down and appreciate the small, fleeting moments of life, the way her eyes sparkled when she discovered something new, the sound of her laughter echoing through their home, the quiet moments when she rested her head on his shoulder. He found himself reflecting on his own past and the ways he had been distant or preoccupied, and he made a conscious choice to never take these moments for granted again. The father-daughter bond they had built became stronger with every shared experience. They spent weekends exploring parks, reading books together, and creating little traditions that belonged only to them. John noticed that Emily began to include him in her thoughts more often, telling him when she was excited, scared, or proud of herself. This level of openness was something John had never experienced before, and he cherished it deeply. He realized that building trust and love was a process. It's one that required patience, consistency, and heartfelt attention. As time passed, John also began to teach Emily life lessons in gentle, meaningful ways. He showed her the value of kindness, empathy, and resilience, not through lectures, but through actions. He involved her in small acts of generosity, like donating books to a local library or helping a neighbor in need. Emily watched closely as her father balanced his success with compassion, and she began to understand that true strength lay not only in achievements, but in the ability to care for others and nurture meaningful relationships. John found that being fully present for Emily also helped him process his own grief. The loss of his wife had left a permanent void, one that he had tried to fill with work and material success. But through his growing connection with Emily, began to confront his feelings openly, allowing himself to cry, reflect, and remember. He would sometimes share stories of her mother with Emily, telling her about the little things that made her special, the jokes she loved, and the moments that defined their family. These conversations allowed both of them to grieve together, transforming their sorrow into a source of closeness rather than distance. One day, Molly came to John with a school project about family. She had drawn a picture of herself, her mother, and her father, and she had written a small paragraph about how they loved each other. John felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes as he read it. The project was simple, yet it reflected the depth of their bond. Emily saw him as someone she could rely on, confide in, and love unconditionally. John understood in that quiet moment that all his efforts, struggles, and changes had created a foundation that would support her for the rest of her life. John also began to notice that their relationship had a ripple effect beyond just the two of them. Friends and family remarked on the positive changes in Emily, how she had become more confident, joyful, and expressive. They also noticed changes in John, who now carried himself with a new warmth and approachability. The transformation was not just about correcting past mistakes, but about building a future filled with presence, love, and emotional connection. John realized that being a good father required constant effort, but that effort brought rewards far beyond what he could have imagined. There were still challenging days. Emily, like any child, had moments of frustration, fear, or sadness. John had to navigate these moments carefully, reminding himself to listen, be patient, and provide reassurance. On one rainy afternoon, Emily was upset after a disagreement with a friend. John knelt beside her, held her hand, and guided her through her feelings. showing her that it was okay to be sad, to feel hurt, and to express emotions honestly. Emily's tears eventually turned into smiles, and she hugged him tightly. John understood then that these moments, difficult as they might be, were essential in building trust and emotional resilience. Over time, John also became intentional about creating new memories that honored Emily's mother while celebrating the life they still had. They visited places that had been special to her mother, shared stories of her kindness, and even started small traditions, like baking a favorite recipe together or lighting a candle on important dates. These rituals allowed Emily to hold on to her mother's memory while feeling secure in the love of her father. John realized that grief and love could coexist, and that acknowledging both could strengthen their bond rather than weaken it. John reflected often on the moment at the diner, the hug from the waitress that had sparked this journey. It had seemed small at the time, almost ordinary, yet it had opened his eyes to the power of human connection. That single act of kindness had reminded him that love cannot be measured in money, status, or possessions. It is measured in presence, care, and attention. He realized that his life had changed not because of wealth, but because he chose to show up, to listen, and to love deliberately. As Emily grew, John continued to prioritize their relationship. He adjusted his work commitments, ensuring he had time for her every day. He involved her in decisions, listened to her opinions, and celebrated her individuality. Emily flourished under this attention, becoming a confident, happy, and compassionate child. John saw in her the best qualities of both himself and her mother, and he felt an immense sense of pride, not in her achievements, but in the love, kindness, and emotional intelligence she was developing. John also reflected on how his own perspective on life had shifted. He now understood that true wealth lay not in possessions, but in the relationships we nurture. The lessons he had learned through parenting Emily were lessons he applied to the world around him. He approached business and life with greater empathy, patience, and mindfulness, realizing that human connection was far more valuable than any deal or contract. His life felt richer, not because of money, but because of love and quiet moments. John would watch Emily asleep or laugh at something she said and feel a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He knew that the journey was ongoing, that there would be challenges, and that he would not always get everything right. But he also knew that he had learned the essential truth: being a father required presence, attention, and love every single day. That commitment had transformed their lives. It had given Emily the security and happiness she deserved. As the years went by, John and Emily continued to build memories together. They traveled, explored new hobbies, celebrated milestones, and faced challenges as a team. Through it all, the bond they had developed remained unshakable. Emily knew she could rely on her father, and John knew that the joy of watching her grow and thrive was far more valuable than any financial success he had achieved. Looking back, John realized that the diner moment had been a turning point in more ways than one. It had taught him about empathy, about the importance of emotional connection, and about the true meaning of fatherhood. That simple hug had sparked a transformation in both their lives, creating a relationship rooted in trust, love, and mutual understanding. He had learned that the smallest gestures can have the greatest impact, and that showing up, listening, and caring is the greatest gift a parent can give. John understood now that life's true wealth was measured in moments, memories, and relationships. He had learned to prioritize love over work, presence over possession, and connection over accomplishment. Through his journey with Emily, he discovered that happiness and fulfillment come not from what we have, but from how deeply we care and how fully we show up for the people who matter most. The transformation was complete not because the past could be changed, but because the present had been embraced with intention, heart, and love. And as John and Emily continued their life together, they both carried forward a legacy of love, presence, and understanding, a legacy far richer than wealth, far deeper than material success, and far more enduring than anything money could buy.